Yomi is Bava Kamma Daf Ches. We're going to start on the bottom of Zayin Beis, around 9 lines from the bottom. Rav Shmuel bar Abba mi'Akronya. So Rav Shmuel bar Abba asks the following question: Rabbi Abba, Kishain Shaman, because we said yesterday's daf, we said that Rabbi Shmuel says when you do damages, you have to collect from the best of the property, but it's the best of the property of the nizak, the one who's damaged. And Rabbi Akiva says it's the best of the property of the mazik, the one who does the damage itself. So he asked the question, when they evaluate to figure out the amount of money that you have to pay, which is the best of the property, b'shaloin shamin, do you calculate on the best of his property? Meaning if he has class B, class A, class C, you do by his class A. Oh, b'shal olam shamin, or do you go vis-a-vis not his own property, but what is generally speaking the class A property? So Aliba Rabbi Shmuel, it's not a question according to Rabbi Shmuel but the Nizak Shaminan, because he says you always have to pay according to the best of the property of the Nizak, his class, the one who's damaged. Kiti according to whom is it a question? Only Aliba Rabbi Akiva. Only according to Rabbi Akiva, who says the Mazik Shaminan, he says we calculate on the basis of the Mazik's property. So there, the question according to Rabbi Akiva says, my Meitav Sadeh, when it says the best of his property in the Torah, Amar Achmano Miyuti the Nizak, means to say the best of the Mazik's property, but unlike the Nizak's property. And so therefore, it's the best of the Mazik's property, unlike the Nizak, so it's the Class A property in general. O Dilma Miyuti the Amor, maybe we say the best of the Mazik's property, meaning to say, even though generally speaking, this is a Class A property, but it's the Mazik's Class B property, we go to the Mazik's Class A property. We don't go by the general objective world. We go by the Mazik's himself's property. So Amrei, so Rabbi Abba responded, Rachmana Amar, that the Torah says, Meitav Sadeu. The Torah says he has to give the best of his field. And you say, no, give the best, objectively speaking, of Class A property in general. No, give the best of his Class A property. So the Gemara says, let's ask you, we have a contradiction to this idea that says that you go by the best of his property. So the Gemara says, we have a contradiction. Let's say the person has only Class A properties. And then there are 3 people coming to collect from him. A person who he damaged, who collects from the Edis. That's the Nizak, who collects from the Edis. Or a creditor who collects from the Bainers, collects from Class B. Or a ksuba, a woman collecting ksuba, she collects from Class C, but he only has Class A. Then kuam govim edis. Then everybody obviously collects from his edis, from his Class A. That's all he has. Beinunis, let's see, he only has Class B. Kuam govim beinunis. Everybody collects from his Class B. Ziboris, if he only has Class C, obviously kuam govim ziboris. Everybody only collects from Class C. But hayuel edis u beinunis v'ziboris. Let's say he has edis, beinunis, and ziboris. He has all 3. Then the Zakim B'idis, the guy who has damages to collect, he collects from the best, the Class A. Balchov B'Beinonis, the creditor collects from Class B. The Ksuba Sisha B'Ziboris. Ksuba of a woman collects from the Ziboris. Idis U'Beinonis, let's say he has only 2 properties, Class A and Class B. Nizakim B'Idis, the person who's collecting damages collects from Class A. Balchov Ksuba Sisha B'Beinonis. But the creditor and the Ksuba, they collect from Class B. Beinunis Uziboris, let's say he only has Class B and Class C. Nizakin Ubalchov, the Beinunis, and the creditor and the damages collect from the Beinunis, from the Class B. Ksuva Sisha Viziboris, and the Ksuva, and the woman collecting Ksuva class from Class C. And then the next case, the last case is Edis Viziboris, let's say he only has Class A and Class C. Nizakin Edis, the person who's collecting damages collects from Class A. And the creditor and the person collecting the ksuba collects from Ziboris. The Balchov and the ksuba sisha, they collect from the Ziboris. But anyway, how is this a question? Katani Mia Mitzia. We said in the middle case of the Brisa, Beinonis Viziboris, that let's say he has only 2 properties, Class B and Class C, that the Nizakunu Balchov the Beinonis, that the person who's collecting damages and the creditor collect from the Beinonis of Suvas Isha B'Tziboris, and the woman who's collecting Suva collects from the Tziboris. And if you're going to say we don't go objectively, we go according to what he himself has evaluation of, then Tasa Beinonis Shalo Ke'idis, make his Beinonis like it's Class A property, and the Balchov should only be collecting from the Ziboris, from the Class C property. So this is a proof that we go objectively and not vis-a-vis what he's saying. So how can we say we go vis-a-vis his own property? Where it says, no, here, this case is different, because what's the scenario here? He had a Class A initially in that case, and then he sold it. So therefore, he initially had a Class A, and then he sold it, and so therefore he had three properties, and that's why we say the creditor collects, in this case, from the Beinonis. So the Gemara says, he had a Class A, and then he sold it. Therefore, the creditor collects from Class B. This is indeed logical, from the fact that it states in the last case of the Bryce Achrisi, that if he has Class B and Class C, that the person collecting damages collects from the Beinonis, from the Class B, and the creditor and Ksuva collect from the Ziboris. So in that case, Kashina Adadi, the two brises are contradicting each other, because in the first brise we said that a creditor collects from the Beinonis, but in this case, where he only has, it says where he has only Class B and Class C, we're saying that the creditor collects from the Ziboris. In the first price, we said he collects from the Beinonis. So we have two contradiction. How do we deal with the fact that it's that in the first price it says the Balchov, the creditor collects from the Beinonis, and in the second case, the Balchov collects from the Ziboris. So Kashina Adadi. So we must say Alav Shmamino. We have to say like the answer we gave before. Kansha Isolo Edis Machara. In the first case, he initially had a Class A property and then he sold it. And so therefore the creditor collects from the Class B because it is indeed his Class B. Whereas in the second case, he never had the Class B property, and so therefore the Beinonis goes by his Class B property, which is by the rest of the world the Class C property. Alternatively, there's a different girsa which says Ravashi gives a different answer. In both cases, he didn't have another answer is that he never had a case of where he had the three properties and he had the best property and he sold it. Well, Kasha, so how do we explain the contradiction between two prices? That in the first case, we're going to say that his Beinonis is like generally speaking, like the Edis in general. And so therefore we're going to say, in this case, we're going to say that the second brisa is where his Beinonis is like the Edis in general. And so therefore, when we give him the Ziboris, we're giving him the Beinonis according to the general world. We're going to the approach that we say we go by La'olam. So therefore, that's why we give him the Ziboris. Vikan, whereas in the first case, the Lo Sheva Beinonis Shalok Edis Nama. According to the first case, his Beinonis is not like the Edis in general. And so therefore it's just like a Beinonis, and therefore we give it to him. Ibai same our third approach, EDV could go and try some Beinonis Shalok Beinonis Nama. Our third approach is his Beinonis is like the Beinonis in the world. So therefore, how do we explain the distinction between the first case and the second case? So they are arguing about a different machokas. Mar Savar B'Shaloin Shavin, Mar Savar B'Shalom Hein Shavin. One says we follow his approach. The one who says we follow what he has. Therefore, we're going to give him Class C property. Mar Savar B'Shalom Hein Shavin. But one says we follow the general world, and therefore we give him the Class B property. Ravina says, no, the dispute goes back to Ula's position. What was Ula's position? Ravina says, Dvar Torah, biblically speaking, Balcho Boris. Ula says that biblically speaking, the creditor is supposed to get the class C property, as it says, stand outside if you should stand outside, and the man who owes you money should take out his security outside. What does a person typically take out? It takes out the least of his utensils. So typically speaking, you only have to pay him back with the class C, with the worst of utensils. So why do we say pay him back with the class B property? Because we want to make sure that people continue to lend money. So we see from here, so the one who says you pay him back in class B, he holds like the takana of Ula. Umar, and the one who says that you pay him back with class C, he doesn't hold like the takana of Ula. He says you pay him back with the class C property. So now the Braisa says, so we've been discussing now that case that you pay back to three people. There are three different ways of collecting. The Nizakin gets the Edis, the Palchov gets the Beinonis, and Ksuba gets the Zibor. So let's say a person has three properties, and he sold them all to one person, or he sold them to three people, he sold them all at the same time. And we say all of the people come in the place of the owner, meaning say that the lukuchos, the purchasers, go have the law of the seller, meaning say if somebody purchased the purchasers have now the halacha of the person who sold it to them, meaning say they have to pay back the person. So if somebody bought back Edis, he has to pay to the Nizak. And if somebody bought the Beinonis, he has to pay. If somebody got owed Eftelokech, and the person who bought the Class B property has to pay it to the creditor, and the person who bought the Class C has to pay it to Ksuba. But let's say they bought it one after the other. Then when everybody only collects from the last person, whatever the last person has. Let's say the last person doesn't have anymore. You go to the person before him. And if he doesn't have, you go to the one before him. Because the reason is you don't collect from lien property when there's free and clear property. So you go to the last one first. But so now the Gemara analyzes this case. What's the case where you sold them all to one person? If you want to say we sold them all at once, if that's the case, if you sold it to three people, where we could have said one of them comes first, and where you sold it to three people, and then you could say you could claim everybody goes in the place of the owner, and that they each have to pay back accordingly. For sure, if they sold to one person, they all have to pay it back in this manner. So it must be the case that it's obvious that you sold it to one person, one after the other. And so still they have to pay it back. Why in a case where there's three prop, that in the case of Umay Shna Shlosha, and why in a case in case of where three people purchased it, do we say the kol chad v'chad amarei nachtu chamakom legavos b'menu? Why in a case where three people purchased it, can the first two who purchased it say, listen, I left you to collect from the third person? Hi nami, even if one person bought it, a kol chad v'chad for each piece of property, he could say, he could say, go collect it from the later property I bought. And Mar says, no, what we're talking about here, the scenario is he bought the best property last, and that's why they all go to that. So therefore, when they came to collect from the last property, he could say, no, don't collect it from the best, go to the earlier ones. It's to my advantage to send you back to my earlier properties to collect it. He bought the best property last, and so therefore the buyer has to pay back. Says, I don't want to pay you for my best, go to my earlier properties. So the Gemara says, well, if that would be the case, then why wouldn't everybody be able to come and collect from the best property, from the Class A property? Because he could say to them, the reason why they can't collect from the best property is because he could say to them, if you want to come and collect from my Class B and Class C properties, which is your right, Shaklis, you take it. But if you want to try and be a nunnik and collect from my Class A properties below, I'll return the Class C property to the guy who sold it to me, and that's who your initial claim is against him. and then you can only claim everything only from the Class C property. And so therefore, better off being quiet and just collecting it from what I tell you. And Gemara says, well, on the top of Kasama base, if he wants to take it by damages, why doesn't he say to him, if you want to take it from the Class B property, take it. But otherwise, I'm going to return the Class C property to the initial owner, and then all you could collect is the Class C property. So why does the creditor ever get to, or the guy who was owed damages, why is he ever able to collect from Class B? You should always send it back to the, say you can only collect the Class C property. Gemara says, no, no, there's nobody to send it back to in this case. So we're talking about a case where the property was bought from the heirs of the initial owner, and so there's nobody to send it back because the orphans don't have to pay. So that's the case. It's Yasmi, Delav B'nei Penarinu. So the Shibuda delay and the lien of the person who owed the money, Alei Didei Ramya, is only on the purchaser. So therefore, he can't say, I'm going to return it. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, Ella, if that's the case, Mishum de Amaru Taima Maya Marabanan Ain in front. So he could say to them, Gemara says another way to explain this is Mishum de Amaru, he could say to them, Taima Maya Marabanan Ain in front and Chas Mishabad Malcolm Sheish Ben Echor Mishum Takanta Didei. He could there's another way he could say it. He could say, what's the reason why the rabbis say you can only collect from the Chas and Mishubadim? So he says, what's the reason why you can only collect from property where there's a lien? Because what's that reason that you can only collect from, that you can't collect from property where there's a lien in a case where there's free and clear property? Because it's to my benefit. I want you to go back to the free and clear property. But but he could say, but I bought this edis last. I don't want you to collect from the edis. So therefore I can send you to the early ones. So the Gemara says that a person is able to say this. Could the Amar Rava, like Rava taught, could the Rava, the Amar Rava call Omer Yavchi b'Takanas Chachamim go into Shalom? Whoever says, I don't actually want this Takana the Chachamim, we listen to him. What's an example of could go into? Could the Rav Huna, Amar Rav Huna, Yechola Isha, Shadi Amar Labala, Ein in his own a person is able, like Rav Huna said, a woman could say, listen, I don't want, a woman could say to her husband, I don't want to, even though her husband is supposed to support her, and in exchange she gives her salary. She could say, listen, I don't want your support, and I don't want to give you my salary. So she's able to say that because the takana was made for her benefit. So to here, this person who's allowed to say you can't collect from the properties with a lien if there's free and clear property, and so therefore they say we want to take from your property which is your best property. You could say no, that's to my advantage to send you to the earlier property. So the Gemara says, Pshita, it's obvious, Machar Lokeach. So now the Gemara is going to say another scenario. So it's obvious that it's obviously the case that, let's say, the person who purchased it, Machar Lokeach, the person who purchased it sold Beinonis Viziboris. He had bought 3 properties, but he sells the Class B and the Class C, Vishir Edis Lefanav, and he only has the Class A left. Then the 3 people who are coming to collect the money go collect from Class A. So there, because that's the last property he has in his possession. And the other properties are not with him, and so therefore he can't collect from them. Because he could say to them, so in that case, the Achroni and Ubeinunis with the burst like the and the Matzil Memerhu, that they're not with him, that he could say government Benus Bizaris, the Lonichoi Bitakanta Darbana. There he can't make that claim because they're not with him. But let's say of a Machar Edis, let's say he sold the best property, Vashir Benus Viziboris, and he kept behind with him the Class B and the Class C properties. What will be the law in that case? Can the person collect the edis from the second purchaser? Because that's the one that he bought that he sold last. And so therefore there's a lien on it, or do we say he has to collect it from the first purchaser, the Beinonis and the Ziboris? So Abayla Maimer also cool government Edis. Abai thought to say that all the people come and they collect from the Edis because that was the last one in the hands of the person who owed the money, and therefore that was the lien on it. And so therefore the first purchaser can now claim the first purchaser basically can't say I don't want it that kind of the chamim. So I'm like Rava. No, Rava said no, that doesn't work. The first person who bought it, when he bought it, what did he sell to the second person? Kol Shlushatavo. He sold him all of his rights. Kol Shlushatavo Yadu. He sold him all the rights that came to his possession. Mekiva and Dilu also Gabe Lokech Rishon. And since if the person who was owed the money had come to the first purchaser, Matzi Agbe, he could collect me Bainerness Uziboris. He could have said, listen, I only have the right to collect from the class B and the class C, and therefore the purchaser could have sent it to them. So now he could do this even though he sold, even though when he bought the Bainerness and the Ziboris, Akati Edis B'nei Chorin, the Edis was still free and clear. The ain't from in the Chasim Shibadem calls Mandika B'nei Chorin, because there he could say, Matzi Amarlai lo nichloi b'takanta. He could have claimed, I don't want this takana. So too, the second person who purchased it from him, the Lokeach Sheni, the second person who purchased it from him, Nami Matzi Amarlai, he could also say to this purchaser, yeah, even though I bought the Edis, when I bought the Edis, I bought it with the right to push you back to the Beinus and the Ziboris. He could say, Gabi Beinus and Ziboris, he could say to him, I bought this rights. I bought the rights to push it back to the first person. Amarava Ruvain Shemachar Kol Sedosov with Shimon. So now the Gemara says another case. Let's say Ruvain sold all of his fields to Shimon. Ruvain borrowed money, and afterwards he sold all his fields to Shimon. And these fields had Edis, Beinus, and Ziboris. Shimon goes to Machar Sadeh Achas Levi. Shimon goes ahead and sells one field to Levi. Uba Balchov de Ruvain. And now Ruvain's creditor comes along and he wants to collect his money from Shimon. So since Ruvain, so now basically Ruvain owed money. Ruvain sold his fields to Shimon. Shimon sold one of the fields to Levi. And now the guy who Ruvain owed the money comes to collect the money. If he wants to, he can collect it from Levi because Levi bought the Bain on his field. He bought the Class B field, and that's what the creditor has a right to collect. Or if he wants to, he collect it from Shimon because Shimon bought it first, and he could collect from him the Ziboris that's left because he bought first all of the land from the borrower below Amran. And when do we say this law? When do we say this law? Only when Shimon sold to Levi the Class B property of Zabin Edis Viziboris. But if Levi bought Class A and Class C property from Shimon, whoa, we can't say this. That's exactly the reason why I didn't buy the Class B. That's exactly the reason why I bought Edis Viziboris. Because I bought the land that you wouldn't have a claim to. That's exactly the reason. And even if he purchased Class B property, even if he sold to Levi the Class B property, Nami Lo Amran, when do we say that the creditor has the right to collect from Levi? Only where Shimon has no Class B property left. Because now the creditor can't say to him, or now Levi can't say to the creditor, Shimon. He can't say, that's why I left you this property with Shimon. So, but Shimon, but if he left Class B property with Shimon, then the creditor can't collect from Levi because the Matzi Armoy, he knocked the Chamakom with government. He could say it's for this exact reason I left you property to collect from Levi. So if he can only come and collect the Class B property from Levi, where Shimon, who's the first purchaser, has no more Class B property. So, okay, let me just stop the recording. We have a little bit to go on. That's what we got up to last night. We'll say a little bit more.